She had everything: power, luxury, fame. But behind the glass walls of her million-dollar mansion, she was completely alone. Then one day, a quiet, kind housekeeper walked into her life and changed everything. But what happens when the world finds out? Can love really survive when it crosses the line between status and heart? It was a golden morning in the upscale neighborhood of Sunset Hill, Los Angeles. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the birds chirped softly as if they knew something special was about to happen. At the very top of the hill stood a luxurious glass and stone mansion, owned by one of California's most powerful women, Madeline Hart. Madeline, 38, was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar cosmetics empire called Hart Beauty. Known for her bold red lipstick, sleek suits, and an intimidating presence, she was the woman everyone admired but few truly knew. Her life was filled with meetings, press events, international travel, and more luxury than most could imagine. But behind the designer clothes and million-dollar smile was a woman who had long forgotten what it meant to feel something real. She lived alone in her sprawling mansion with a rotating staff that changed more often than the seasons. Most left because of how demanding and distant Madeline could be. She wasn't cruel, just detached, emotionally guarded. Since her painful divorce 5 years ago, she had made a rule: never let anyone in, especially not someone beneath her status. But that was before Javier Cruz arrived. Javier was 29 tall, with strong arms from years of physical work, kind brown eyes, and a smile that could disarm the most rigid of hearts. He had been raised in East Los Angeles by a single mother and took on jobs since he was 15. From construction to landscaping to part-time cleaning gigs, he'd done it all. He never complained. He was simply grateful for the work. When his cousin recommended him for a housekeeper position at some rich lady's mansion, Javier hesitated. But bills were piling up, and his mother's medical treatment wasn't going to pay for itself. He showed up for his interview wearing his only clean shirt and borrowed shoes, not expecting much. But to his surprise, Madeline hired him on the spot. Not because he impressed her with his resume, not because he was charming, but because for the first time in a long time, someone looked at her, not her money. Javier started work the next morning. The mansion was breathtaking, but cold. It felt more like an art gallery than a home. Still, he treated every corner with care. He mopped the marble floors gently, dusted the priceless sculptures, and even rearranged the books in her library alphabetically. He did everything with pride, even if he knew no one would notice. But Madeline noticed. She watched him from her office window, sipping her espresso. She'd never seen anyone move through her home with such calm confidence. Most employees were nervous around her, always trying to impress, afraid to make a mistake. But Javier, he was just himself, polite, quiet, and honest. She couldn't remember the last time someone like that entered her world. It was a Thursday afternoon when their first real conversation happened. Madeline had just gotten off a stressful Zoom call with her investors. Her patience was thin, and her head was pounding. She walked into the kitchen to make herself a drink, only to find Javier already there, humming to himself while organizing the pantry. He turned around, surprised to see her. "Oh, sorry, Miss Hart. I didn't hear you come in." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you singing?" He laughed nervously. "Not singing, just humming. It helps me concentrate." She studied him. Most people would have apologized, panicked, or left the room. But Javier held her gaze, respectful, but unafraid. "I didn't hire you to hum," she said coolly. "No, ma'am," he replied. "You hired me to keep your house clean. I just like doing it with a little rhythm." To her own surprise, Madeline smirked, the kind of smirk that hadn't touched her lips in months. She didn't say anything else and walked out. But that night, she thought about that moment more than she cared to admit. Over the next few weeks, their interactions grew. They were never long, never deep. Just short exchanges in the hallway or during breakfast prep. "Do you always make coffee this strong?" "It wakes me up." Well, it could wake the dead. Sometimes he would find her working late in the library and bring her a cup of tea. She never asked. He just knew when she needed it. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled over Sunset Hill, the power suddenly went out. Madeline was in the middle of editing a presentation when everything went dark. "Damn it," she whispered, fumbling for her phone. She grabbed a flashlight and headed downstairs, only to find Javier already in the hallway, lighting candles. "You okay?" he asked, his voice calm. "Power's out," she replied, stating the obvious. He chuckled. "Yes, I noticed." She crossed her arms. "Do you know how to fix it?" He shrugged. "Depends. If it's just a breaker, I can check. But if it's the grid, we're stuck until morning." For the next hour, they sat in the candlelit kitchen while rain tapped against the windows. Javier made her a simple grilled cheese sandwich, the kind she hadn't eaten since childhood. She found herself laughing at one of his stories about his mom confusing Alexa for a real person. "You're different," she finally said. He raised an eyebrow. "Different how? You're not afraid of me. Everyone else is. Even my own board members." He looked her straight in the eyes. "Because I don't work for your money. I work for your house." "That's different." There was silence. Then she whispered, "And if I had nothing left, I'd still make your coffee. Just maybe not so strong." That night, Madeline went to bed with a strange ache in her chest. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't stress. It was something else, something unfamiliar. Could it be longing? One Saturday morning, she asked Javier if he'd join her for breakfast. He looked surprised, but didn't refuse. They sat across from each other in the sunroom, sharing eggs and toast. She asked about his childhood. He asked about her favorite memory before becoming rich. "Nobody ever asks me that," she said, almost in awe. Maybe they should. For the first time in years, she told someone about her father, who died when she was 16. How he used to call her Little Lioness. How she built her company in his memory. He listened, not like someone waiting to talk, but like someone who actually cared. By the end of breakfast, her heart was racing, and not from caffeine. She didn't know what this was. She didn't know where it was going. But Madeline Hart, the ice queen of Sunset Hill, was falling. And he didn't even know it yet. The weeks after that breakfast felt different. For the first time in years, Madeline Hart looked forward to something other than board meetings and profit reports. She started spending more time in the house. More time noticing little things Javier did. How he folded the towels just the way she liked them. How he hummed softly when dusting the piano. How he always asked if she'd eaten. She tried to tell herself it was nothing. She was a grown woman. He was her employee. This couldn't happen. But the more she told herself that, the harder it became to ignore the pull she felt whenever he walked into the room. A soft tension hovered in the air between them, never spoken, but always there. One evening, she returned from a charity gala earlier than expected. She was still in her red velvet gown, hair pinned up, heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She found Javier in the kitchen, cleaning out the fridge and singing along to an old love song on the radio. He turned around, startled. "Oh, I didn't know you were back already." She smiled, leaning against the doorway. "You sing when you clean now? Only when no one's watching." "Well," she said, stepping closer, "I guess I ruined that." There was a beat of silence. Something shifted in the air. "You look different," he said, his eyes lingering a second too long on her face. "Not just the dress. You look softer." She blinked, taken aback. "Is that a compliment or a comment on my personality?" He grinned. "Maybe both." And just like that, it happened. The line blurred. She offered him a drink. Just one. They sat on the patio under the stars, sipping wine and listening to the wind rustle through the trees. She told him about her ex-husband, a man who had used her name, her success, and broken her trust. Javier listened quietly. And then he shared about his father, how he left when Javier was 5, and how his mother worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. Somewhere between the second glass of wine and the sound of crickets in the distance, she reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. The next morning, Madeline stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Her face showed no regret, only confusion. They hadn't kissed. They hadn't crossed that final line. But something real had happened. What was she doing? She was a CEO, a public figure. He was her housekeeper. This couldn't work. But later that day, as she came downstairs and saw Javier arranging fresh flowers in the living room, she felt that same warmth in her chest again. He looked up, smiled like always. But there was something new in his eyes. An unspoken question. Was this real? Their dynamic changed subtly. They still had their roles. He cleaned. She ran her empire. But now their eyes lingered a little longer. Their conversations dipped deeper. They started having breakfast together almost every weekend. She started asking for his opinion on personal things. What color to repaint the guest room? Which photo to hang in the hallway? It wasn't love yet, but it was something dangerous. Something electric. Then came the storm. One Friday afternoon, Madeline's assistant showed up unannounced while she was out. She came to drop off files and found Javier mopping the library floor while humming to himself. "Who are you?" she asked, confused. "Javier. I'm the housekeeper." The assistant narrowed her eyes. "You're the guy she keeps talking about in meetings." Javier blinked. "She talks about me? Don't get excited." The assistant snapped. "She's your boss. Keep it professional." Javier nodded but said nothing. But when Madeline returned and found him quiet, withdrawn, and distant, she knew something was wrong. That night, she confronted him on the back terrace. "You've been avoiding me," she said. He hesitated. "Your assistant came today." She sighed. "Let me guess, she made you feel like trash. She reminded me that I'm just the help." Madeline stepped closer. "Do you believe that?" He looked into her eyes. "I don't want to. But sometimes it feels like the world won't let me forget." She reached up and touched his face gently. "You're not just anything to me, Javier." He leaned in. This time, she didn't stop him. They kissed. And the world disappeared. For weeks after that night, they lived in a secret bubble. Behind closed doors, they were two people who had found something rare. She'd come home from meetings and fall into his arms. He'd leave sweet notes in her breakfast tray. They were careful. Nobody knew. But even careful hearts can't stay hidden forever. One morning, a paparazzi photo surfaced of Madeline and Javier walking in the garden, his hand lightly brushing hers. It went viral. Millionaire CEO romantically linked to her housekeeper. Her board called an emergency meeting. Investors began pulling out. Tabloids spun wild stories. Her ex-husband even released a statement mocking her taste in men. Madeline was furious. Not with Javier, but with the world. She didn't care about the headlines. She cared about him. But Javier couldn't handle the pressure. "This isn't my world," he told her. "I can't be the reason everything you build starts falling apart." She begged him to stay. Told him she didn't care about the company, the tabloids, the whispers. But Javier had made up his mind. He packed his things that night. Before leaving, he whispered, "You were the best part of my life, but I won't be the reason you lose yours." And he walked away. Days turned into weeks. Madeline tried to move on, threw herself into work, hired PR teams, rebuilt her image. But every room in that mansion reminded her of him. Every morning felt empty without his smile. She finally understood what it meant to have everything, except the one thing that mattered. One evening, after a long board meeting, she found herself standing outside a modest house in East LA. Javier's house. She knocked. He opened the door, stunned. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Because I've spent my whole life building something I thought would make me happy. But I was wrong," she said softly. "The only time I felt peace was when I was with you." He looked at her, unsure. "I don't care what people think," she added. "I just care that I don't lose you." Tears welled in his eyes. "I didn't think you'd come for me." She stepped forward. "You once said you'd still make my coffee even if I lost everything." He smiled. "I'd still do it. Just not so strong." They laughed. And then they kissed again, this time with no fear. 6 months later, Madeline stepped onto the red carpet at a charity event, wearing a sleek black gown. Reporters were ready, microphones out. But this time, she didn't walk alone. Javier stood beside her in a crisp suit, his hand proudly in hers. The cameras flashed wildly, but Madeline didn't flinch. She had stopped hiding. Because she had finally realized something. Being a millionaire made her powerful. But being loved by Javier, that made her whole. And that was the story of how a guarded millionaire woman found love where she least expected it, with the man who quietly brought life back into her home and heart. If you enjoyed this emotional journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel Color Off Stories for more beautiful stories like this one. Until next time, stay kind, stay human.